It is 9:40. Which according to our agenda says it is time to start. So I'm going to go ahead and get started because I want to get to the conversation. Welcome, thank you for coming to listen to us today. I'm very excited to be joined by my colleagues in arms here within this OA journey that we've been on together. And this is the Do Non-BPC Approaches to Open Access Values-Led Publishing Work. And for those who might have been following this group, or at least representatives of these presses for some time, this is an update of how the particular models they have adopted to open up the books that they publish, how that is doing. And so hopefully we can have some really interesting conversation, because we're also going to talk about the challenges, which is always fun. But before we do that, I'd like to give kind of an overview of a few things, in particular, what kind of model they have adopted. We're all so particular about models these days. And so in this case, this is what has been evolving to what's called a conditional OA book revenue model. You might be familiar with the term subscribe to open. This is an iteration of that, but all subscribe to open models are conditional in some way. But before you get into the details of that, these are the resources where you can go and find every possible model out there so far that supports OA book publishing. And these are excellent resources, especially the OA directory, where you can scroll. We don't realize there are so many revenue models out there. And publishers use many. Depending on the type of publisher they are, the size they are, whatever they publish, what their programs are, you have to find the money. And you're not necessarily going to do that through one model. We always know, like, okay, so you're married. You have hopefully multiple revenue streams, right? At least two, to help support how you want to live, right? So the more revenue streams you have, the more stable you might be. And so the same thing happens at a publisher level. And especially for book publishers who've had to go through a lot of tumultuous years for decades of having support and then not having support. As journals deals got bigger and bigger and swallowed up more of library budgets, then it was always the book budget that kept getting sacrificed in that, where you're relying on that hopeful, end of year money to be able to support it. And so that's off again support from the library community that is really hard to predict for publishers who are trying to pay their people so they can buy their groceries and take care of their own families. And so I find this interesting. This is from the OA and OA Books Toolkit. If you're not familiar with that, take a picture. We will be sharing the slides through the conference, so these will be available wherever those are. But this slide is always fascinating to me. It taught me a lot. I will first say, and I don't think I introduced myself, my name is Charla Lair, and I work at Lyrasis, where I'm the Senior Strategist for Open Access and Scholarly Communication Initiatives. I'm a librarian. I have a degree. I've worked in libraries, worked in consortia of different types. I don't have a business degree. And I'm not a consultant. There are those in the room who have this expertise. But I work in this space and trying to understand how money flows. And so I've been digging into these models and trying to understand them and be able to translate them, not just to libraries, but also publishers who are trying to understand it. So when you look at this, you start to see something interesting, at least from my standpoint. Those that are highlighted, you can see they adopt multiple models because they have different flows of money coming in for reasons of making their publishing operations sustainable. They had to find ways to get money, just like if you're not making enough money, you might have to get a second job, right? It's the same idea. And depending on what type of press they are, if there's, especially in university presses, whether their institution supports them well or not. Do they have trade publishing? Do they have, there are multiple layers in order for them to find the money to meet that bottom line of paying their people, paying for their third-party relationships so that they can meet the standards that the library community requires in order for them to be high quality. So it's really complex, and it fascinates me as a librarian. We don't talk about this. We don't know this. And so when we start saying, oh, we'll just flip to open, it's really hard for them to do. And I do want to say one thing that I don't have a slide. We talk a lot about what's the difference between open access and paywall. We always talk about the access side. Paywall means that only those who pay for access get it, and open access, anybody can get it. But what does that mean on the publisher side? It has to do with where the money enters into the system for their operations. It's very reductive, but in a paywall environment, they make the thing, and then they sell it to try to recoup their costs. In an open access environment, they have to get the money first before they make the thing. And if flipping to that, it's just like if you are in a job where you get paid twice a month, and you go and get a new job. It only pays once a month, and you start the job, and you're not going to get paid until the next month after that. You have to reshuffle how your bills are paid. You have to think about, oh, I have to save up some money. I have to have money, stored beforehand so that I can meet all my obligations, buy my groceries. They're doing that at a publisher level. So it's really hard, and that's why, especially in book publishing, it's slower, because book publishing requires a lot more labor, and which labor costs a lot more. So you had the list before of all the programs and all the models. These are the ones that are actively seeking library funding right now. More are coming, which terrifies librarians, but actually is a good thing, because we want more open content. The ones highlighted are the ones that are talking today or being represented today. And they will be introducing themselves when they talk. But first, I will at least talk about what they are doing and what the model is they're choosing. Again, it's the conditional OA. So for Opening the Future, this is a model that was developed out of the COPEM project. And this is Central European University Press, which is represented today, and Liverpool University Press, which we have in spirit here, have been using this model, the Opening the Future, to use revenue from backlist subscriptions to cross-subsidize opening their new scholarly titles. Fund to Mission. This is University of Michigan Press, who's using this model to open up at least 75% of their monographs. Opening the Future, back to the first one, they're opening one book at a time as they meet their revenue threshold needed to open that book. University of Michigan is trying to say we want to meet 75%, and they've actually they started with 25%, and then they're this year trying to get to 75%. It's that flip of money towards the front. And they're using this, and that by the end of 23 with the 75% through library support, funder contributions, and an increased subsidy from their host institutions. So it's not just totally reliant on the library community in order to make this happen. Direct to Open is MIT Press's efforts in doing this, where they're incentivizing Collective Model to open its full list of scholarly titles upon publication from 2022 from support from libraries. But we also wanted to make note, this also includes a larger subsidy from their home institution's library, and then they've had also support from a funding agency. And it helps give that time for them to grow the funding community around it, so that whenever that funding agency goes away, that they are still sustainable. Sorry for all the words, but I thought this was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I figured this out. And it's still reductive. So I see Rain Crow back there, and he's probably thinking, sometimes, yes. But I think it's still important, especially for those I serve, which is the library community. But I think it's helpful for the publishers as well. So we hear a lot about these non-BPC models, and I like to put them in two buckets. We have these conditional open access. They have backlists. They're trying to flip or transition, where you have these collective crowdfunding or membership models. Usually they're OA native. They're not having to deal with legacy issues. So money flows differently, and they also have different obligations. And so that's where we're putting that. And you can see at the bottom, as far as representatives of those, if you're familiar with them. So I'm going to go back and forth. So for conditional open access, subscribe to open, it's a subscription model. Ongoing spend. And I do want to take the time here to say subscription is not a bad word. It doesn't have anything to do with commercial publishers. Subscription, if you look it up in the dictionary, you do this with Netflix, you do this with magazines. This is just about ongoing spend commitment. It doesn't mean paywall. So on the crowdfunding side, again, it is a subscription model. They are asking for ongoing spend. The second bullet points. The conditional open access model is best suited for publishers transitioning from paywall to open with an existing customer base, but it's not required. On the journal side, there are publishers doing this with brand new journals. And on the book side, they didn't necessarily have a funding community that already existed that was sustainable, and they've been having to grow it in order to support their programs. On the crowdfunding side, it's best suited for publishers that are OA native publishers, but not required. The conditional side, they have an incentive. So does the other side. Except on the incentive side for conditional, there are examples. There are multiple things that can provide incentive for participation. On the conditional side, they will usually have paywalled access to a portion or the entire backlist, or they might provide guaranteed OA publishing for an affiliated author if they have a model where they might not be open if they're not, if they don't meet their funding goal. They can still at least guarantee that the authors affiliated with those who have participated in it can still publish OA. On the collective crowdfunding membership side, their incentives are sometimes reduced print costs or even direct participation in governance. And the other side can have that too. They're not exclusive, but this is where the incentives you predominantly see on each side. Conditional open access, subscribe to open, requires a certain revenue threshold to be met to convert to open. It's usually covering a particular publishing program, not entire operations. So you will hear from each of these who are using that conditional model. They are not trying to get money to do all their operations. They have journal programs, they have trade publishing, they have all kinds of different things or variations thereof, and they're all unique in what they might provide because they're different sizes, different purposes, just like libraries. We're all snowflakes here. On the collective crowdfunding membership model side, it requires a certain revenue threshold to be met to convert. Oh, wait. Yes, I'm in the right place. Apologies. It requires a certain revenue threshold to be met to convert to open. Both of them do. In fact, commercial publishers even require a certain revenue threshold to be met to convert to open or to publish something. Everything is conditional. That is not a bad thing or a unique thing. At the end of the day, on the crowdfunding side, they're actually wanting to cover their entire operations or most of it through the model. So if you're one of those publishers that all you do are OA books, then that collective crowdfunding membership model might be the better one for you. If you have more diversity in what you do in your programs, the other side might be for you as well. But on the library side, just because they're transparent or not about what that threshold is, that it's still there. Because if they don't make the money they need to be able to do what they are trying to do, they can't do it. Both of them work through normal procurement workflows. to try to be Diamond OA. Diamond OA just means that it's free to read and free to publish. But on the conditional side, where there might be the option that if they're not fully funded, they don't meet that condition, they have a plan B. They can keep it in a paywall where they can recoup those costs that they didn't get in the upfront part, right? If they didn't get enough money to publish it, then they can go ahead and publish it, but then try to get the money through a subscription paywall model. So there's a plan B because they have an obligation to their authors. They already signed a contract or whatever. We need to make sure as libraries that we're funding them well enough so that they can make it open. On the other side, again, the Diamond OA, free to read, free to publish, even if the threshold is not met. What happens when the threshold is not met on this side is they may not publish as much. Or, that they have to find more money from somewhere else to be able to honor their obligations to their authors. So on that side, it's really important for libraries to show up so that they can honor the obligations to their authors, which might be your faculty that you're trying to serve at your institution. But everything is conditional. I want that to be very key here. And you can see the representatives of publishers for each model. So I have a background in geography and I like maps. Anybody who's been in a Zoom call with me sees the map in the background. And I thought it would be really fun for us to see the universe of this, because one of the cool things about open, it's not just about the content being open, but the CRMs become open. We start to see who's actually participating in these programs. Are they peer institutions who might have similar programs that they're trying to support? That might be a proxy for, oh yeah, maybe we should be supporting this too. What I found really interesting about this is some of these models, people are like, I don't know if it's successful. I don't know if anybody's really participating. They are, and they are all around the world. This is representing the participants funding the Opening the Future Central European University Press and Liverpool University Press. Libraries, in a lot of cases, are actually supporting both presses through this program, so I just lumped them together, not for efficiency, but to show that it is actually a collaborative effort across both presses. This is the map of University of Michigan Fund to Mission. You can see that it isn't as much of a presence elsewhere, and it's not because they aren't wanted. It has to do with having enough money for the resources in order for them to do the kind of marketing that's needed. The Opening the Future has a stronger presence over in Europe because that's where the administration of the program is based. So they had a stronger presence over there, whereas we have a strong presence here in the US for this program being a US press. This is MIT, Direct to Open. They have many more, and they're spread out further. What I see this for the other two programs is, we need to talk to these people too, and we are. And it's wonderful to be able to work together in this way because we share, and we're going to be sharing with you what we're learning through all of this and how we can work together, because this is about a global shared collection. This isn't about just supporting one press or another for the sake of bibliodiversity and the voices of authors that they're trying to represent. I have actually a map of all of the OA book programs out there, but I didn't want to distract us from other things because I really want to focus on these programs. But I did put all of them together so you could see this is the universe. If you're a library and you haven't participated in any of these, or if you've done one, you are joining hundreds of libraries around the world. This is no longer an experiment for any of these models. It's becoming established. It's being part of the budget lines. It's being put in permanently into library budgets. And so worrying, is it going to be successful? Yes, it is successful. So with that, I'd like to move on. We have actually questions that we've come up with, so we're not going to do any more PowerPoint. We're just going to have a conversation. And actually, while I'm transitioning, can you go ahead and ask maybe the first question?
Okay, yes. This just wouldn't be a conference presentation without a struggle with technology. Hi, I'm Amy Harris. I'm with the MIT Press, and thank you all. Thank you to the folks virtually who are joining us, showing up to talk about non-BPC equitable models for open scholarly publication. The first question is, why did you adopt these models? What makes your press different? Why aren't other presses adopting these models? And I'll pass it to Emily first.
Okay, so I think we have to do a speed round because that question in itself, I think probably we could discuss together for a while. I'm Emily Poznansky. I'm from Central European University Press, and why did we do it? Open access fits very much with the mission of the university and the press. So Central European University was founded in Budapest after the fall of communism, and it was the university itself was based around the concept of open society. So that's its founding. And the press, what we do is we offer a pathway to understanding the region better, pulling out the trends that are of global relevance, and OA fits within that mission. We want people to know more, and we want to share our research with the world. So that's the why. During the pandemic, we opened up all our books on the Muse platform, and you won't be surprised to hear our usage figures soared. The readership was different to our closed readership, and the books that were most read, Academic Freedom was the most downloaded book in China. So again, it sort of supported why we're making this move. And lastly, so from a European perspective, open access is not a question of if, but how. So we're doing it, and it's just putting our brains together to make it work.
Yes, and I'd also like to credit visionary leadership at all of these presses. I don't think MIT Press would be doing this without Amy Brand, our director, who is a scholar. She worked for many years in libraries. She's worked for digital science. She made it a priority when she returned to the MIT Press as the director that this be a direction we take for reasons that have to do with equity, inclusion. This has a pro-social, we are driven by pro-social values with this, but also have adopted a model that we think makes good business sense.
And I'm Kristen Twardowski from University of Michigan Press and Michigan Publishing. And we adopted the fund-to-mission open access ebook model for very similar reasons, but also because we had already invested a great deal in other sorts of open. So as background, Michigan Publishing, University of Michigan Press, has created an open source platform for scholars called Fulcrum, which you may be familiar with. It hosts Charleston's Against the Grain. And we hadn't actually had an ebook collection until around 2019 when we created a restricted access collection on that Fulcrum platform. But as with some of these others, the pandemic showed us, okay, what happens if we open this new baby collection to the world? And it did become obvious that these monographs that we thought got fairly low interest were actually of use for courses, for classrooms. And what with our thrust towards open source in other areas, this did fit with who we wanted to be. We consider ourselves a publisher that does push for open in as many areas as we can. And I think that leads us into our second question, which I'd love to ask. Is this working? Are you reaching your goals? Do you consider your models successful?
Sure. Yes. In brief, yes. It is a lot of work. I won't deny that. Most of what I do all day long is work on direct to open. It's not my only purview, but yes, it is working. We've been humbled by the support of libraries around the globe, and we're looking forward to continuing it.
Yeah, I think you're not expecting us to say it's not working, are you? It's working. So the model that Opening the Future is we're unlocking one book at a time. So we don't have an inbuilt threshold. It's a gradual transition. It doesn't require additional institutional backing of any kind. So it works, and it can work for, I think, a number of presses. I think the other measure of is it working, apart from library support, which has been great, and from sort of surprising places, is the usage. So we took a look at the first book that we opened up through the program on the Muse platform, and the usage statistics were phenomenal. And in comparison to our closed stats, they're just through the roof. And if that's not a case for making books open access and for the sustainability of the monograph itself, then I don't know what. I mean, a part of what we're doing is, it's a pathway to open for our presses, but it's also to do with the book format. So if journals and articles are racing ahead with open access and their usage figures are soaring, but books are just going to be pushed down lower as a format. And so that's another part of it, and that's working.
Yeah, and I will say for Michigan, I agree that it's working, but I also think that we're all on a path. We're not at the end, but we are seeing this is going to be sustainable. This is something that works, but we're still growing. Like Charla said, we're taking time to transition. I know over the past year, we essentially increased our supporters we doubled them. And seeing that number double is what inspired our provost to give another 3 years of additional funding, because they really wanted to see that this was important to the library community, to the scholarly community before they put their money in. Because Michigan definitely is a believer that this is something we have to do together. It relies on scholars being on board, librarians on board, publishers on board, and whatever other funders are out there. I think the next question might be yours, Emily.
Mine. To ask it. What were the surprises? So what were you not expecting to have happened, or any adjustments you've had to make along the way?
Well, I think we were surprised by many practical things. Our model was designed by the brilliant Raim Crow, and I say that with him in the room. His thoughtfulness about the business sense behind this was so thoroughly researched that it's wonderful and in some ways prophetic, but also there were things that we encountered, like we've tried to do things that step outside of a market space, like having the incredible MIT Libraries first-year sponsorship. They gave money to help us subsidize the fees of master's, bachelor's, and associate's institutions. And a kind of unintended fallout of that in year 2 is that because that subsidized fee amounted to about a 25% discount, folks said, "Whoa, there's a big jump this year." And what is intended is something that maybe enhances the collective action features of the model, or even the organizing features of the model, then become, in kind of a market mindset, like, it's an increase. And I've been working with those libraries to make things work for them. I also, it's interesting in the publisher space, the other thing that really strikes me, and here in particular, I've heard, well, you can't just rely on altruism. And it's funny, I don't hear that a lot in talking about the model on a day-to-day. Maybe I hear activism, but I think I'd encourage everyone to think about it as alignment. And we've had more than one library tell us this is a part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion work to bring how we're spending our collections budget in line with our values. And we're proud to offer something that gives libraries the opportunity to do that. But there are many surprises. I could go on, but I'll pass it to Kristen.
Yeah, and I'm going to take a slightly different approach to surprises, which I actually think a lot about our authors and how they've responded to open access and the move there. Because as anyone who's a publisher knows, getting your authors on board is a super important thing. This is their scholarship. How it is shared with the world makes all of the difference. And we've actually seen an interesting phenomenon where Open has drawn our authors closer together in what I consider these seasonal cohorts, where all of a sudden I see these people in different fields who wouldn't necessarily have interacted together, but saw each other in the marketing webinar and know they're both open access, sharing information about each other's books and saying, oh, I came to your webinar, when they wouldn't have done that when we were restricted access. And I think that kind of growth and interdisciplinary collaboration is one of the things that we've really wanted to see happen for open access. It's been one of the most rewarding things for me. Infinite other things surprising as well, but I know time. So I am going to ask the big question, I think, which is pie in the sky. What do you wish was different about open access, the publishing landscape, the world? And I'll start with you, Emily. No pressure.
It's a little question to end the panel with. I think for me, it's the time it takes from sort of us agreeing on that alignment, libraries, presses, we agree we're working towards the same thing, versus making that decision to sign up, to make that change. That time, it does take a little while, and I would try to shorten that if I could, because I think these models, I liked the way you put it, that alignment, the values, it does allow for that, but it's the legacy systems that we have to sort of mold to support those. That's
Yeah, and I think that I should also note that we're not alone in this work. There are lots of other publishers pursuing other things. I'm glad to have the folks from Punctum here in the room. They're presenting on the Open Book Collective later in the conference. I encourage you to go and check out their session. Subscribe to Open. There's a session about that later. I wish we could all work together more effectively. It's so hard to get the word out. I send out hundreds of emails a week. And, I think that we still have work to do to make this space more collaborative and, to work together in a way that helps, helps us as a community achieve this work in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think my pie in the skies might be hard to achieve. I think all of ours are, but I have two. One of them is I honestly just wish that the university scholar system wasn't going toward adjunctification. I wish that our scholars had funding from their universities and security in their universities to do the work, and then to get the funding they need to do that work. On a more publishing and library level, I wish libraries didn't have to do more and more with fewer and fewer resources. We're housed within our library. I see what that looks like. It makes it hard. And I know publishers, university presses in particular, are also trying to do more things in more formats, in more places, with not a change in resources. And that makes our work super hard, especially since we're all trying to get this scholarship out in the world. Charlotte, is there anything you wish was different?
I wish whenever we started with the open access movement, we would have invested in the nonprofit publishers first, because they have a definition of enough. These presses are not asking for massive amounts of money. Whenever I see invoices going across at Lyrasis with other vendor partners that we work with on behalf of our members, where I see $1 million invoices just for an annual subscription. And so I wish that when this all started, we said we'd started with what aligned with our principles and our missions at our institutions, so that we could sustainably fund those, maintain the bibliodiversity that's out there for books and journals, and then give the commercial publishers saying, okay, this is what we have, because we still need them. If they went away tomorrow, we would have a whole lot of authors in this world that didn't have anybody to go and amplify their voice. And so I want to see a rebalance of the money and how it flows and shifts in this, so that we can all be in here, all ships rise. And that's what I wish. I also wish that when you leave, and we will have a few minutes for questions, but go ahead and ask. When you leave, go and talk about these programs, especially if you already are a participant in any of them. And as publishers, ask questions, find out, start to participate if you haven't already. That's my big ask. But for now, John Lavender has a microphone if anyone has any questions.
Just to maybe encourage questions, and they can come afterwards. Oh, there's one at the back there. We're shaping these models together, so that's what makes it quite exciting. It's, presses with librarians, and we really need the feedback. So it's, it's a co-creation. So it's...
Just say who you are, where you're from.
Hi, my name is Willa Tavernier. I'm from Indiana University, Bloomington. And I have a question about the subscribe to open model and the backup of, well, if we don't get enough upfront, we go to the subscription model. Is there a second tipping point or threshold that would lead to future opening if when they go to subscription, they get enough subscriptions through the paywall? So that's my question. And then I couldn't help, this is a comment, I just couldn't help but notice the distribution of the supporters for this program on the map and the areas that are excluded. And it makes me wonder, well, what's happening to really break down the other systemic barriers, to making a truly open, scholarly ecosystem, because I do work with researchers we recently had an OA symposium at our university, and one of our researchers previously was at an HBCU, and he couldn't help but comment that he's the same person, but when he was at an HBCU, he would frequently get turned down by these same presses who are not willing to accept his scholarship because he's at an R1. So I just wanted to just put that out there, because the map shows it very starkly.
Oh. So, and I should clarify that, the map is of participation, which, thank you for that question, by the way. So that maps who's participating. The works that we're publishing as a result are open. They're freely available around the world. Authors, we don't discriminate. It isn't just authors from institutions that participate, that are able to publish openly with us. It's anybody who publishes with us. And yes, we have an editorial apparatus, and I'm not involved with that, but and we have a rejection rate that is, subject to our editorial board, our, various review processes. But that is, we're interested in expanding the participant base for sure. I think that we also recognize that there, at this point, that there are probably, there are institutions that are going to be able to participate up front. There are institutions that are going to take time to consider it. And it's just a process of expanding the base itself. But the works are open, and the access to publishing is, you don't have to be affiliated with a certain institution or come with money. You can publish openly with us.
Yeah, and I do also want to answer the first question I think that you asked, which is about, okay, so currently there's this closed access content that's also part of the deal. What is that always going to be closed? That's something that we at Michigan talk about a lot. And we actually have a library advisory committee that we ask, okay, if we got a lot of money, what would you want to see happen to it? What does the future look like? In a perfect world, I think, I shouldn't say this with my boss in the room, I think it would be wonderful for us to be able to open the backlist if we had that money, and that is a personal dream of mine. I will also say, yeah, you're right, that map of supporting libraries who are able or who have currently been reached out to is very Eurocentric. It's very US and Canadian centric at this point. I know with, again, Michigan, that's a thing we're really trying to reach out to. You may have seen me scurrying around the exhibit hall looking for sales agents other places, because right now our sales agent is me and the person we're going to hire, and we just have more connections here. Sorry, did you?
Yeah. Yeah, we're not EBSCO or in this, we don't represent a lot of staff that have reached in an international way to make this map, and this is the funding map, not the publishing map. The funding map be more distributed. And of course, there are free writers, and that's kind of the point. so that for those who need to be free writers can and still have access, and their authors can also, their faculty can also publish at any of these. But that is going to require more support in order for us to be able to help redistribute the costs across a larger funding community so that this can be sustainable. But yeah, I didn't make that clear at the beginning, so I will work on that slide next time I show it, that this is not like a publish and read agreement where you're only providing funding for your own authors to be able to publish. This is for anyone. It's just whenever you're in a conditional model and it goes to paywall, then what happens there as far as authors and wanting to publish open in-house? Some of them are resolving that issue by providing OA guarantee to those who support it, but that's rare. In all of these cases, the authors are doing this at no cost to them. And I think we're out of time. Thank you very much. We are all here available for questions. You can also contact us, and enjoy the rest of your day.